Hello everyone. My name is Ava, and welcome to Fluent English Journey. If this is your first time on this channel, don't worry. Here, we upload daily videos to help you improve your English naturally. We do this by sharing everyday stories and situations. Listening to these stories carefully will help you understand real English conversations, expressions, and how people really speak. Today, I want to share a story from my own life. This story will help you practice English by listening to simple, real-life situations. A few weeks ago, something interesting happened. I woke up earlier than usual because I had planned to visit my parents. Normally, I wake up around 7 a.m., but that day I woke up at 6 a.m. At first, I felt a little sleepy, but I got out of bed. I started getting ready for the day. As I got dressed, I realized that the bus schedule had changed. The bus would leave earlier than I expected, so I had to hurry. I quickly made a cup of coffee to wake up, grabbed my bag, and left the house. On my way to the bus stop, I noticed something unusual. The streets were very quiet. There were only a few cars and a few people walking. It made me feel calm, but also a little nervous because I did not want to miss my bus. When I got on the bus, I chose a seat near the window. I always like sitting by the window because I can watch the world outside. Watching people and the city go by makes me feel thoughtful. On the bus, I saw a man reading a newspaper. I also saw a woman looking at her phone. I find it very interesting to see how people spend their time while traveling. Some people read, some people listen to music, and some people just watch the world go by. I thought to myself, maybe I can use this time to practice English. I could read a short story or listen to an English podcast. Using time like this for learning is very helpful. After about 40 minutes, the bus arrived in my parents' town. My parents were waiting outside, smiling as always. I ran to greet them with a warm hug. Then we walked together to the local park. We love this park because it is peaceful. The trees give a lot of shade, and the birds make beautiful sounds. While walking, my father told me about a small garden he had planted in their backyard. He grows vegetables and herbs. It is amazing to see how much work goes into keeping a garden healthy. I asked him about his daily routine for the garden. He said he spends about an hour every morning watering the plants, checking for pests, and trimming leaves. I realized that patience and consistency are very important in life. After the walk, my mother invited me inside for breakfast. She made my favorite dish, scrambled eggs with fresh vegetables and a cup of herbal tea. While we ate, I told them about my week and some challenges at work. I explained a project I was working on that required careful planning and teamwork. My mother reminded me to take breaks and not to stress too much. I really appreciated her advice because sometimes I focus so much on work that I forget to rest. Later that morning, I decided to visit a small local bookstore. I love bookstores because they smell like paper and new ideas. I looked around and found a book on personal development that I had wanted to read for months. I spent almost an hour reading a few chapters in a quiet corner. While I was reading, I noticed another visitor, a young woman named Sarah. She was looking at the same shelf as me. We started talking about our favorite authors. She recommended a book that had changed her perspective on life. I really enjoy these small conversations because they make an ordinary day feel special. As I left the bookstore, I thought about how small experiences can make a day memorable. A simple conversation, a good book, or noticing something beautiful outside can make life more enjoyable. On my way home, I reflected on the many small choices we make every day, like which route to take, who to talk to, or what to read. Each choice affects our mood, learning, and sometimes even our perspective on life. That evening, my husband and I decided to cook dinner together. We made a simple pasta dish with fresh ingredients from the market. While cooking, we talked about our plans for the next week, places we wanted to visit, and small changes we wanted to make in our daily routine. Cooking together allowed us to share responsibilities and gave us time to connect and relax. I always feel that daily routines become more enjoyable when shared with someone who cares. After dinner, we went for a short walk around our neighborhood. The streets were calm, and the cool breeze felt refreshing. We noticed children playing in the park, neighbors greeting each other, and people jogging. Observing these small moments reminded me that life moves forward quietly, but each moment is full of life and opportunities. Before going to bed, I spent some time reviewing English phrases and expressions I had learned that day. I like to write them down in my notebook and practice using them in sentences. This habit has helped me improve my English naturally. I realized that consistency is important, just like my father's gardening routine. Small, daily practices make a big difference over time. The next morning, I started my day with a short jog in a nearby park. The air was fresh, and I could hear birds singing as I ran. While jogging, I noticed an older man sitting on a bench, reading a book. I waved at him, and he smiled. Simple moments like this make you feel connected to your community. After my jog, I stretched for a few minutes and walked back home. I felt more energetic and ready for the day. I prepared breakfast while listening to an English podcast. Combining small routines with language practice helps me remember new words naturally. That day, I made oatmeal with fresh fruits and a glass of juice. Later, I had a meeting at work. I had to present a report to colleagues from different departments. I felt a little nervous at first, but I reminded myself to stay calm and explain my points clearly. During the meeting, I noticed that using clear and simple English helped everyone understand me without confusion. One of my colleagues, David, asked some questions, and I answered them with examples from recent projects. After the meeting, I felt proud. Preparation and practice really help in professional situations. After work, I visited a local cafe that I like. It has a quiet atmosphere and good coffee. I sat by the window and ordered a cappuccino. While waiting, I saw a group of students practicing English together. They were discussing a story and trying to use new vocabulary. Watching them reminded me that learning English can be fun and social. It was really inspiring to see the students at the cafe learning English together in such an interactive way. They were discussing a story, sharing ideas, and trying to use new vocabulary. Watching them made me think about my own learning. I realized that I could improve my English by finding small opportunities to use it in real life, not just in books or on apps. On my way home, I decided to stop by a small flower shop I like. The owner, Mr. Thompson, always has fresh flowers and a very warm smile. I chose a bouquet of tulips for my husband. I thought it would brighten our evening and make him happy. While I was choosing the flowers, Mr. Thompson and I talked about gardening, seasonal changes, and even some interesting stories from his travels. These small conversations are fun, but they also help me practice speaking natural English in everyday situations. That evening, my husband and I decided to rearrange a few things in our living room. We moved the sofa closer to the window so we could enjoy the sunlight during the day. We also placed a small table for our plants. While we were organizing, we talked about our favorite memories in that room. I remembered the first dinner we cooked together and the times we spent reading on the sofa. Sharing these stories in English makes our conversations more meaningful, and I also remember useful expressions naturally. Later, I spent some quiet time reading a novel I had recently started. The story was about a woman who traveled alone to a small town and discovered a new way of looking at life. As I read, I thought about how small decisions, like choosing a walking route or talking to a neighbor, can change the way we see the world. Reading in English is helpful not just for learning vocabulary, but also for finding ideas to describe your own experiences in simple words. Before going to bed, I wrote a short diary entry in English. I described my day, the people I met, and the small moments that made me happy. Writing helps me organize my thoughts and practice sentences that I can later use in speaking. I realized that combining listening, speaking, and writing every day makes learning English much more effective than focusing on only one skill. The next morning, I decided to try something new. I wanted to explore a small neighborhood market that I had passed by many times but never visited. As I walked there, I noticed how different the streets felt compared to my usual route. The houses were older, and there were small shops selling fruits, vegetables, and handmade goods. Everything looked cozy and inviting. I stopped at a fruit stand where the vendor, Mr. Kareem, greeted me warmly. He offered me a taste of a local fruit I had never tried before. It was sweet, tangy, and very refreshing. I bought a few pieces and thanked him. This small interaction reminded me how simple gestures, like tasting a fruit or smiling at someone, can make a day enjoyable. While walking further, I saw a man repairing bicycles outside a tiny workshop. He was focused on his work, using tools I didn't know much about. I asked him how long he had been repairing bicycles. He told me he had been doing it for over 20 years and had learned everything from his father. He also said he loved helping people fix their bikes. I listened carefully because I wanted to practice understanding English in real-life conversations, spoken slowly and clearly. After exploring the market, I went to a nearby cafe for a quick lunch. I ordered a vegetable sandwich and a cup of green tea. While eating, I noticed an elderly woman reading a newspaper and taking notes. I thought about how people spend their lunch breaks differently. Some relax, some catch up on work, and some, like her, enjoy quiet moments with information. I imagined her day and silently described her routine in English. This small mental exercise helps me practice thinking in English naturally, without feeling forced. Later, I returned home and found a package that had arrived for me. It was a book about time management and productivity that I had ordered online. I opened it carefully and started reading the introduction. The author wrote about small daily habits and how they can create long-term success. I realized that my small morning routines, jogging, reading, visiting local places, were already helping me stay organized and calm. I made a note to try the techniques in the book to see if they could improve my day even more. In the afternoon, my husband suggested we do something creative together. We decided to paint a small wall in our living room a new color. While painting, we talked about how different colors can affect mood and energy. I practiced describing the shades in English: light blue, soft green, warm beige. We laughed when I accidentally spilled a little paint on the floor. It reminded me that small mistakes are part of learning, both in life and in language. After finishing the painting, we went for a short walk outside. Nearby, neighborhood children were playing soccer in a small field. I watched them, noticing how focused they were and how much fun they had running after the ball. I thought about how simple activities like playing, observing, or exploring can teach patience, focus, and joy in small moments. That morning, I noticed how teamwork, energy management, and small daily actions all connect to learning and personal growth. While walking through the neighborhood, I described what I saw in English to my husband. I used full sentences and tried to include as many details as possible. This exercise made me realize that daily observations can be excellent practice for speaking English naturally. That evening, I prepared dinner. I made a simple dish of grilled vegetables and rice. While cooking, I listened to an English podcast about cultural traditions around the world. The podcast talked about festivals, local customs, and daily life in countries I had never visited. I tried to repeat some of the phrases aloud to practice pronunciation and fluency. Cooking while listening might seem simple, but it is a very effective way to combine language learning with everyday tasks. After dinner, I spent some time reviewing emails and messages I had received during the day. Some were work-related, and some were personal. I replied in English, trying to write clear, polite, and natural sentences. I notice that using English in real communication helps me remember expressions better than just studying from books. Each email became a mini practice session, which improved both my confidence and writing skills. Later, I planned the next day. I wrote down tasks, errands, and ideas for practicing English. I included visiting a local park, reading a few chapters of a book, and speaking aloud about my day. Planning in English is a great way to practice vocabulary related to time, schedules, and daily routines. Organizing my thoughts in English every day makes speaking and understanding the language easier over time. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day. I thought about the people I had met, the small conversations I had, and the moments I spent observing the world around me. I realized that daily life offers countless opportunities to practice English naturally. Talking to a vendor, describing a scene, or sharing thoughts with my husband, all these moments help improve language skills. I wrote a short paragraph summarizing my day, focusing on key vocabulary and expressions. Writing at the end of the day helps connect listening, speaking, and writing, making my English stronger every day. The next morning, I decided to wake up early and take a new route for my morning walk. I wanted to explore streets I had never visited before and notice things I usually missed. As I walked, I discovered a small bakery that had just opened. The smell of fresh bread and pastries was inviting. I went inside and met the owner, Mr. Ahmed, who kindly offered me a warm croissant to taste. While eating, I asked him about his daily routine. He explained that he starts baking at 4 a.m., so everything is fresh when customers arrive. I found it fascinating to see how much dedication goes into small businesses. After visiting the bakery, I continued my walk and noticed a young man named James painting a mural on a wall near the park. He was focused and skillful, using bright colors to create patterns and shapes. I asked him what inspired him to start the mural. He explained that he wanted to bring creativity and life to the neighborhood. We talked briefly about art, color choices, and how creative work can influence moods. Observing his process and describing it in English in my mind helped me practice detailed description, which is an essential skill for advanced listening and speaking. When I returned home, I prepared a light breakfast. I made avocado toast with a boiled egg and a glass of orange juice. While eating, I listened to a short story podcast in English. The story was about a man who discovered a hidden park in his city, which became his favorite place to relax. I tried to imagine myself in his shoes, thinking about what I would notice first, how I would feel walking there, and what small details would catch my attention. This mental exercise improves comprehension and helps me visualize stories in English naturally. Later, I visited a nearby library to return some books and borrow a new one. The librarian, Mrs. Lewis, greeted me warmly and suggested a book about mindful living. I decided to borrow it because I wanted to learn more about staying focused and calm in daily life. While browsing the shelves, I noticed a group of students discussing a novel together. I overheard some of their phrases and expressions. It reminded me how important it is to listen carefully and pick up new vocabulary from real conversations. In the afternoon, my husband suggested visiting a small craft shop that had recently opened. The shop had handmade candles, pottery, and decorative items. While exploring, I picked up a candle and noticed its intricate design. The shop owner, Anna, explained how each candle is carefully made by hand and shared tips on using scent to create a relaxing atmosphere at home. I described everything to my husband in English, focusing on adjectives and details. Talking about tangible objects like this is excellent practice for building descriptive language skills. After returning home, we cooked lunch together. We made a vegetable stir-fry with rice. While preparing the ingredients, we talked about cooking methods and which vegetables go best with each sauce. I practiced using words like sauté, chop, mix, and season in English. Cooking together also allowed us to discuss healthy habits, meal planning, and time-saving techniques in the kitchen. Linking conversation with daily activities makes learning English natural and memorable. Later, I watered the plants on our balcony. I noticed the small flowers opening and the fresh smell of the soil after watering. I reflected on how taking care of plants is similar to personal growth. Both require attention, patience, and consistency. I described my actions aloud in English, using words like nurture, grow, healthy, and thrive. This helps me think in English and practice sentences I can use in real life. In the evening, my husband and I decided to go for a short bike ride around our neighborhood. The weather was perfect, there was a gentle breeze, and the sky was clear. While riding, I described the surroundings in English. I talked about the color of the sky, the movement of the trees, and the rhythm of the wind. We also noticed a few people jogging and some children playing near the park. Observing daily life and describing it aloud is one of the most effective ways to improve both listening and speaking skills. After returning home, I spent some time reading a few chapters of a book about communication skills. The book discussed strategies for active listening, asking meaningful questions, and responding thoughtfully. I realized that listening in English is not just about understanding words, it is also about noticing tone, intention, and context. I practiced repeating some sentences aloud, focusing on pronunciation, emphasis, and natural rhythm. Before bedtime, I wrote a short reflection about my day. I described my morning walk, the bakery visit, the library, the craft shop, and the bike ride. Writing in English helps connect experiences with vocabulary and expressions, reinforcing everything I practiced during the day. I noticed that combining listening, speaking, observing, and writing makes learning English more holistic and enjoyable. Later that night, I reviewed a few new words I had learned while reading and talking. Words like intricate, nurture, emphasize, and observe were added to my vocabulary notebook. I made sentences with each word to help me remember them better. This habit of active reflection ensures that new words are not forgotten and can be used naturally in real conversations. The next morning, I woke up feeling motivated to try a different approach to my usual routine. Instead of drinking coffee immediately, I started with stretching exercises. I rolled out my mat, took deep breaths, and focused on loosening my muscles. I noticed how much tension I carry without realizing it, especially after long work days. While stretching, I described each movement aloud in English using words like extend, bend, balance, and relax. Speaking while performing small tasks makes learning more interactive and helps me remember vocabulary naturally. After stretching, I prepared a smoothie for breakfast. I blended bananas, spinach, and a little honey. While pouring it into a glass, I observed the vibrant colors and textures of the ingredients. I described everything aloud in English, from the creamy consistency to the fresh smell. Paying attention to small details improves observation skills, which are essential for listening comprehension at higher English levels. Describing actions aloud also improves speaking fluency. Later, I took a short walk around the neighborhood to enjoy the morning sun. I met my neighbor, Mr. Clark, who was planting flowers in his garden. We talked about gardening techniques and which flowers bloom in each season. I listened carefully and repeated some of his sentences in my mind to practice pronunciation and rhythm. I also shared a small story about the plants I grow on my balcony, explaining how I care for them and the challenges I face. Using real-life examples makes English practice much more engaging than only using textbooks. After the walk, I visited a small local market to buy fresh vegetables. While selecting tomatoes, cucumbers, and carrots, I noticed the vendor arranging a colorful display. I complimented the arrangement in English, and we talked briefly about which vegetables are best for different dishes. Small conversations like this are excellent practice for everyday English and help me learn how to express opinions politely. I also noticed the importance of tone and friendly body language in communication. At home, I prepared lunch, a vegetable curry with rice. While cooking, I explained my steps aloud in English. First, chop the onions and garlic. Then, sauté until golden. Finally, add the spices. Talking while performing tasks links vocabulary to actions, making it easier to remember words. I also discussed cooking techniques with my husband, comparing flavors, textures, and presentation. Shared activities like this are ideal for practicing descriptive and instructional language naturally. In the afternoon, I visited a nearby library that I had never explored before. The building was quiet, filled with rows of books. I found a section dedicated to biographies and picked up a book about an explorer who traveled to remote parts of the world. I read a few pages while sitting in a comfortable chair near the window. While reading, I imagined myself on the explorer's journey, thinking about the challenges and discoveries. Visualization like this improves comprehension and helps form mental pictures when listening to English stories. After leaving the library, I went to a small cafe for tea. I chose a seat by the window to observe people passing by. I noticed a young man practicing piano on a small keyboard, his fingers moving quickly and confidently. I described his actions and expressions aloud in English using words like focused, graceful, and rhythmic. Observing and describing real-life situations is a practical way to practice English while improving attention to detail. I also practiced asking questions in English, imagining how I could start a conversation. Later, I returned home and decided to organize my workspace. I cleaned my desk, arranged stationery, and sorted documents into folders. While organizing, I described each action in English using words like sort, arrange, tidy, and file. Small activities like this are surprisingly effective for learning practical vocabulary. I also reflected on how being organized reduces stress and helps me focus. Talking about personal experiences in English makes sentences more meaningful and easier to remember. In the evening, my husband and I went to a local park to enjoy the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. We watched people walking dogs, children playing, and birds flying. I described everything aloud in English, focusing on colors, movements, and feelings. Observing and talking about nature not only improves English skills, but also makes us feel calm and connected to our surroundings. The sky that evening was painted with beautiful shades of orange and pink. I described the scene aloud in English, using words like vibrant horizon and reflection. We walked slowly, noticing birds returning to their nests and children playing near the swings. Observing nature and describing it aloud helps improve both listening and speaking skills. It encourages attention to detail and the use of varied vocabulary. We also talked about our future plans for the weekend, practicing how to express intentions and suggestions naturally in English. After returning home, I prepared a light dinner of grilled vegetables and lentils. While cooking, I played an English audio story about a person who overcame daily challenges with patience and persistence. I repeated a few sentences aloud to practice pronunciation and comprehension. I noticed that listening while performing daily tasks helps internalize expressions and sentence structures naturally. Learning English this way feels easy and connected to real life. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day. I wrote a few sentences about my morning stretch, the walk, the library visit, and the park. Writing helps me organize my thoughts, use new vocabulary, and reinforce expressions I practice during the day. I also wrote down a few new words I learned, such as vibrant, meticulous, and perspective, and tried to make sentences with them. Combining listening, speaking, writing, and observing daily life creates a complete learning experience that strengthens English skills steadily. The next morning, I decided to wake up a little earlier than usual and try something new. I wanted to explore the small lake near our neighborhood. As I approached the water, I saw ducks swimming calmly and some children feeding them pieces of bread. I described the scene aloud in English: the smooth water, the gentle movements of the ducks, and the bright sunlight reflecting on the surface. Observing and describing nature helps me practice vocabulary related to colors, movement, and emotions. While walking around the lake, I met an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Benson, sitting on a bench watching the water. We started a conversation about the weather and local wildlife. I asked questions about the types of birds they often see, and they shared stories about how the lake had changed over the years. Listening carefully and asking questions is a great way to practice English naturally. I also repeated some of their phrases silently in my mind to remember them. After the lake walk, I visited a small bakery nearby. I ordered a fresh loaf of bread and a cup of herbal tea. While waiting, I observed the baker kneading dough and shaping it carefully. I described his movements aloud in English using words like knead, shape, and fold. Paying attention to small details and actions helps improve my ability to describe processes and sequences in English. The aroma of the bread and the warm atmosphere made the morning feel cozy and calm. Back at home, I organized my kitchen pantry. I sorted cans, jars, and packets into categories. While doing this, I described my actions aloud: arrange, categorize, label, and clean. I also thought about why certain items should be placed together, like spices and herbs or cereals and grains. Talking while performing tasks makes vocabulary meaningful because it is connected to real life. I noticed that organizing small spaces reduces stress and makes cooking easier during the week. In the afternoon, my neighbor Lisa visited to borrow a recipe book. We started talking about cooking and meal planning. I explained a simple recipe step by step in English. She asked questions about ingredients and timing, and I answered clearly and naturally. Casual conversations about familiar topics, like cooking, are a very effective way to practice English in real situations. They also build confidence in explaining things logically. After Lisa left, I did some indoor exercises. I set up a short circuit with stretches, squats, and light weights. While exercising, I described each movement aloud: lift, stretch, bend, and balance. I noticed how my body reacted, feeling stronger and more energetic with each set. Talking about physical activities in English helps link vocabulary with real sensations and actions. I also thought about how I could explain this routine to someone else, which strengthens my ability to give instructions in English. In the evening, my husband and I took a short walk to a nearby coffee shop. The streets were calm, and the air was cool and fresh. While walking, I described the surroundings in English: the color of the trees, the sound of distant traffic, and the smell of freshly cut grass. Observing everyday environments and expressing them aloud is a great way to practice descriptive language. At the coffee shop, I ordered a cappuccino and a small sandwich. While waiting, I noticed a few students studying and practicing English together. Watching and listening to others in real-life situations reminds me how much we can learn from observing people and conversations. After returning home, I spent some time reading a short story in English about a traveler who explored a quiet village. I try to visualize every scene in my mind, imagining the small streets, local shops, and the people he met. This kind of mental visualization is excellent for improving comprehension, listening, and speaking skills because it encourages active engagement with the language. I paused occasionally to repeat sentences aloud, practicing pronunciation and intonation. Later, I prepared a simple dinner of grilled fish and vegetables. While cooking, I described each step in English: season the fish, chop the vegetables, grill until golden. I also explained a few steps to my husband, practicing instructional language naturally. Sharing tasks in English makes practice interactive and memorable. After dinner, we discussed plans for the next weekend, including visiting a nearby park and trying a new cafe. Expressing intentions and suggestions in English is useful for everyday communication and helps me form complex sentences more confidently. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph in English about the lake visit, bakery, pantry organization, and cooking dinner. Writing helps me reinforce new vocabulary and sentence structures. I also noted a few new words, such as aroma, need, sequence, and visualize, and tried to use them in sentences. Combining observation, conversation, and reflection creates a full learning experience that strengthens both comprehension and speaking skills. The next morning, I decided to try a different approach to my usual routine. Instead of starting with breakfast, I spent the first half hour writing in my journal. I described my thoughts about the upcoming week, plans for work, and small personal goals. Writing aloud in my mind helped me focus on descriptive words and connecting ideas clearly. This practice organizes my thoughts in English and prepares me for natural conversations during the day. After journaling, I went outside for a short walk around the block. The air was crisp, and I noticed small details I usually overlook, like a squirrel running across a tree branch and leaves gently falling on the sidewalk. I described everything in English, using words like flutter, scamper, and scatter. Observing and describing real-life situations strengthens vocabulary and helps form complete sentences naturally. On my way back, I stopped by a small flower stall. The owner, Mrs. Ramirez, was arranging fresh roses and tulips. I asked about the care each flower needed, and she explained which flowers thrive indoors and which are better outside. I repeated her advice in my mind and practiced describing the flowers' colors, shapes, and scents in English. Using real-life objects for practice makes learning practical and memorable. Back at home, I prepared a light breakfast of oatmeal with fruits and a cup of green tea. While cooking, I described the steps aloud. Boil the water, add oats, stir gently, and top with fresh fruits. I also thought about how I could explain this recipe to someone who had never cooked before, practicing instructional language naturally. My husband joined me, and we talked about our plans for the day while enjoying the meal. Conversing in English during routine tasks makes practice seamless and meaningful. Later, I visited a small local library I had never been to before. The building was quiet, with shelves full of books on different topics. I browsed the nonfiction section and found a book about time management and productivity. I spent time reading and imagining how I could apply the techniques to my own daily schedule. Visualizing scenarios in English while reading improves comprehension and helps form new sentences in context. On the way home, I noticed a street artist painting a mural on a brick wall. I paused to watch and described his movements aloud: brush strokes, color mixing, and layering. I even imagined what he might be thinking as he created each detail. Observing people at work and narrating their actions in English is an excellent way to practice descriptive vocabulary and storytelling skills simultaneously. In the afternoon, my husband and I did some gardening. We planted a few herbs and small vegetables in our backyard. While digging holes, watering, and planting, I described every action in English: dig, plant, sprinkle, cover. Gardening provides a great opportunity to practice vocabulary related to nature and actions while performing physical tasks. I also talked about how long it might take for the plants to grow and be ready for harvest. Explaining processes in English reinforces logical sequencing and sentence formation. Later, I did some light cleaning around the house. I organized books on the shelf, folded clothes, and wiped surfaces. While cleaning, I described my actions aloud: arrange, fold, wipe, dust. This small habit of verbalizing everyday activities strengthens my ability to narrate tasks naturally. I also reflected on how keeping a clean and organized environment reduces stress and gives ideas to expand sentences with reasoning and details. In the evening, we visited a local cafe. I ordered a latte and a small pastry while sitting by the window. Observing people outside, I described their actions aloud: someone jogging, a couple walking hand in hand, and children playing near the park. Describing real-world scenarios helps me practice English in dynamic contexts and improves listening comprehension when others speak. I also thought about how I could start a polite conversation with strangers, practicing questions and responses in my mind. After returning home, I prepared dinner, baked chicken with vegetables. While cooking, I explained each step to my husband in English, practicing procedural language: marinate, season, bake, serve. We talked about flavors, textures, and presentation. Cooking together allows for interactive language practice, and discussing preferences encourages the use of descriptive and comparative language naturally. Later, I spent some time reading an English storybook about a traveler exploring a quiet village. I imagined myself in the story, describing scenes in my mind and repeating sentences aloud to improve pronunciation and fluency. I imagined each scene vividly in my mind, focusing on details like colors, sounds, and smells. Visualizing stories in English strengthens comprehension, helps me remember vocabulary, and improves my ability to narrate similar experiences aloud. I paused occasionally to repeat sentences aloud, practicing intonation and rhythm for natural speech. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short summary in English about my morning walk, library visit, gardening, and cafe trip. Writing helps reinforce new vocabulary and expressions while connecting them to real-life experiences. I also noted a few new words, such as marinate, procedural, sequence, and vivid, and created sentences with each to practice using them actively. By combining observation, conversation, cooking, and reflection, I built a complete English practice routine that strengthens listening, speaking, and writing skills. The next morning, I decided to try something different. Instead of my usual breakfast, I prepared a fruit salad with mangoes, strawberries, and kiwi. While chopping the fruits, I described the colors and textures aloud in English: bright, juicy, soft, tangy. Paying attention to small details while describing them helps me practice both vocabulary and sentence structure naturally. My husband joined me, and we discussed which fruits are best for different seasons. Talking about familiar topics makes practicing English simple and meaningful. After breakfast, I went for a walk in a nearby park. The path was lined with tall trees, and their leaves were slowly turning orange and yellow. I described the scene aloud: crisp leaves underfoot, the gentle rustle of wind, and the occasional bird flying overhead. While walking, I met a man named Thomas who was jogging. We exchanged greetings, and I asked how often he runs. He said he runs every morning to stay healthy. I tried to summarize his routine in English in my mind. This small interaction helped me practice asking questions, listening carefully, and forming responses naturally. On my way back, I stopped at a local bakery to pick up fresh bread. The aroma was irresistible. I watched the baker carefully place loaves in the display and described his actions aloud: knead, shape, bake, glaze. Observing and describing what people do in daily life improves my ability to narrate actions clearly in English. I also complimented the bread and tried to express appreciation naturally, practicing polite conversation. Back home, I spent some time organizing my workspace. I sorted notebooks, pens, and documents into categories and described each step aloud: arrange, file, label, organize. This small task gave me an opportunity to practice vocabulary related to daily chores. I also reflected on how keeping a tidy workspace makes it easier to focus, describing the benefits in English using complete sentences. Later, I visited a library I hadn't been to before. The quiet atmosphere allowed me to browse books without distraction. I picked up a book on mindfulness and read a few pages while sitting by a large window. I visualized the examples in the book, imagining how I could apply the techniques in my own life. Thinking in English while reading helps connect vocabulary with concepts and practice comprehension naturally. After leaving the library, I went to a small cafe for tea. I chose a seat near the window to observe people passing by. I described their actions aloud in English: a child skipping along the sidewalk, a man carrying groceries, and a woman walking her dog. Describing everyday scenes enhances my descriptive skills and helps me use varied vocabulary. While sipping tea, I imagined short conversations I could have with these people, practicing questions and polite responses in my mind. Returning home, I did some indoor exercises. I set up a small circuit with stretches, lunges, and light weights. While exercising, I described my movements aloud: bend, lift, extend, balance. I noticed how my body felt with each exercise and described sensations in English: warm, tense, relaxed, strong. Linking physical sensations with descriptive vocabulary helps me practice English in ways that connect directly to real experiences. In the evening, my husband and I tried a new recipe for dinner. We cooked a vegetable stir-fry with noodles and a variety of sauces. While preparing the ingredients, I described each step aloud: chop, mix, stir, season. We compared flavors, textures, and color combinations, discussing which vegetables complemented each other best. Cooking together provides interactive practice and helps me use descriptive and comparative language naturally. After dinner, we took a short walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, and the cool breeze was refreshing. I described the surroundings in English: the soft glow of street lights, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the occasional sound of distant traffic. Observing and narrating everyday environments strengthens my ability to describe scenes fluently. We also discussed plans for the next day, practicing expressing intentions and suggestions using full sentences. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph in English. I described my morning fruit salad, park visit, library, cafe trip, and dinner preparation. Writing reinforces vocabulary and sentence structures I practiced throughout the day. I also noted a few new words such as need, extend, flutter, and complement, and tried to use them in sentences. Combining observation, conversation, writing, and reflection creates a holistic approach to learning English that improves comprehension, speaking, and natural expression. Later, I spent some time planning a small weekend activity. I wrote a list of tasks, places to visit, and ideas for practicing English naturally while completing them. Planning in English helps me organize thoughts and use expressions related to schedules, time, and preferences. I also described my plan aloud, imagining explaining it to a friend. This strengthens sentence formation and fluency in spoken English. This morning, I decided to take a longer walk than usual, exploring streets I rarely visit. The sun was shining gently, and the air smelled fresh after the overnight rain. I noticed small details: puddles reflecting the sky, leaves sticking together from moisture, and birds hopping between trees. I described everything aloud in English: shimmer, reflect, scatter, glisten. Narrating real-life scenes like this helps me strengthen descriptive skills while practicing vocabulary in context. While walking, I found a small stationery shop I had never noticed before. The shop was full of colorful notebooks, pens, and art supplies. I met the owner, Mrs. Thompson, and asked about her most popular items. She explained that students loved notebooks with thick pages for sketches and certain pens were preferred for their smooth ink. I practiced summarizing her explanation in English, which helped me practice reporting information naturally. Later, I visited a small fruit market. The vendor, Mr. Hussein, was arranging oranges and apples in neat piles. I asked him for advice on selecting the sweetest fruits. He explained how to check color, firmness, and smell. I repeated his instructions aloud in English to improve my memory of descriptive and sensory vocabulary. I also imagined telling a friend about selecting fruit, practicing the structure of giving advice naturally. After returning home, I prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs with tomatoes and spinach. While cooking, I described each step aloud: whisk, sauté, season, serve. Talking while performing tasks links vocabulary with real actions, making words easier to remember. I also explained the recipe to my husband, practicing clear instructional language and answering his questions about timing and technique. In the late morning, I cleaned and organized my bookshelf. I removed old books, dusted each shelf, and arranged books by category. While doing this, I described my actions aloud: sort, categorize, arrange, tidy. Organizing books not only makes them easier to access, but gives a sense of accomplishment. Narrating small tasks in English helps me form coherent sentences naturally while linking actions to ideas. Later, I visited a small cafe nearby for a cup of green tea. I chose a seat by the window to watch people walking by. I noticed a man carrying groceries and a woman walking her dog. I described their movements aloud: brisk, careful, playful, steady. I also imagined short conversations with them, practicing polite questions and responses. Observing and describing real-life interactions improves both comprehension and speaking fluency. After returning home, I watered the plants in our backyard. I checked each plant for dryness and trimmed a few wilting leaves. While performing these tasks, I described everything aloud: water, nourish, prune, grow. Gardening is excellent practice for descriptive vocabulary and allows me to link actions with effects naturally in English. I also reflected on how consistent care over time leads to growth, forming sentences that connect ideas logically. In the afternoon, I read a short story in English about a traveler visiting a small town. I imagined the streets, buildings, and people described in the story, visualizing each scene vividly. Visualizing while reading improves comprehension and helps retain vocabulary and sentence structures. Occasionally, I repeated sentences aloud to practice pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm. Combining reading, listening, and speaking makes learning English engaging and effective. Later, I prepared lunch, a vegetable pasta dish with a light sauce. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud: boil, sauté, mix, serve. I also discussed flavors and textures with my husband, comparing which vegetables worked best together. Cooking together provides natural opportunities for conversation and allows me to practice descriptive language, comparisons, and procedural vocabulary in English. In the evening, we went for a short bike ride around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, and the breeze was cool and refreshing. I described the surroundings aloud: the orange glow of street lights, shadows of trees, and reflections in puddles. Observing and narrating the environment helps me practice English fluency while noticing small details. We also discussed plans for the weekend, practicing expressions for suggestions, intentions, and preferences naturally. After returning home, I reviewed a few English podcasts about lifestyle and productivity. I paused occasionally to repeat phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation and rhythm. Listening and repeating at the same time helps me internalize sentence structures and expressions naturally. I reflected on ideas from podcasts and thought about how to apply them in my daily life, creating sentences in English that connect listening, thinking, and speaking. Before going to bed, I wrote a short paragraph about my day, my walk, the market visit, watering plants, reading, cooking lunch, and the bike ride. Writing helps me consolidate vocabulary, practice sentence formation, and connect experiences logically. I also noted new words like nourish, prune, vivid, and procedural and created sentences to use them actively. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, exercise, and reflection creates a complete routine that steadily enhances listening, speaking, and writing skills. This morning, I woke up feeling curious and explored a different part of the neighborhood. I walked along streets I had never visited before and noticed a small bookstore tucked between two cafes. The display outside had novels and travel guides. I described it aloud: charming, cozy, inviting, colorful. Observing small details and expressing them in words helps me practice descriptive vocabulary naturally. Inside the bookstore, I met the owner, Mr. Patel, who suggested a few books about nature and wildlife, explaining which were popular with young readers. I listened carefully, noted the names and topics, and repeated the key points in my mind in English. This strengthened my ability to summarize information and report speech accurately. I picked a book about birds that migrate across continents and imagined explaining these migrations to someone in English. After leaving the bookstore, I stopped at a juice bar and ordered carrot ginger juice. While waiting, I observed the barista peeling and cutting fruits and described her actions aloud: slice, blend, pour, serve. Observing and describing real-life actions improves my ability to narrate sequences clearly in English. I also complimented her on the presentation, practicing polite expressions naturally. Back home, I organized kitchen drawers, sorting utensils, cutlery, and gadgets into compartments. I described every step aloud: arrange, separate, organize, label. Reflecting on how organization improves efficiency allows me to link practical actions with descriptive language in English. Later, I prepared oatmeal for breakfast with sliced apples, almonds, and honey. I described each step aloud: chop, sprinkle, mix, serve. I also discussed with my husband the benefits of a healthy breakfast, practicing comparative and descriptive language naturally. In the early afternoon, I visited a small park I had rarely explored. I noticed a fountain, birds flying above, and children playing near the swings. I narrated everything aloud: glisten, flutter, swing, giggle. I met a woman, Clara, teaching her dog new tricks. I asked questions about training and repeated her instructions in my mind: sit, stay, fetch, roll over. Observing interactions between people and animals provides excellent material for practicing descriptive and procedural vocabulary. After the park, I went to a bakery to pick up fresh bread. I watched the baker shaping loaves and described each movement aloud: knead, mold, bake, glaze. Paying attention to small details improves my ability to describe processes accurately in English. I imagined explaining bread making to someone who has never done it, practicing instructional language naturally. At home, I prepared lunch: vegetable stir-fry with tofu. While cooking, I narrated each step: dice, sauté, season, combine. My husband and I discussed sauces and flavors, practicing adjectives and comparative phrases. Cooking together gives natural opportunities to practice descriptive, procedural, and conversational language in real-life contexts. Later, I cleaned our balcony, watering plants, sweeping the floor, and wiping surfaces. I described my actions aloud: sprinkle, sweep, wipe, organize. Reflecting on how regular maintenance keeps the area pleasant allows me to practice explaining cause and effect naturally. In the evening, my husband and I took a short walk to enjoy the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple. I described the scene aloud: horizon, reflection, glow, fading light. We noticed people jogging, children playing, and a few cyclists passing by. Narrating everyday scenes and observing interactions in public spaces helps me practice vocabulary and sentence formation naturally. We also discussed weekend plans, practicing suggestions and intentions in English. After returning home, I prepared a light dinner of grilled vegetables with couscous. While cooking, I described every step aloud: chop, season, grill, serve. We discussed which flavors complemented each other and how to present the food attractively. Cooking together provides excellent opportunities to practice descriptive language, give instructions, and engage in casual conversation in English. Before bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph in English summarizing my morning walk, bookstore visit, park exploration, bakery stop, and meal preparations. Writing helps reinforce vocabulary, sentence structures, and sequencing skills. I also noted new words: glisten, drizzle, need, and horizon, creating sentences to use them actively. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, walking, and reflection builds a comprehensive English learning routine that strengthens listening, speaking, and writing skills steadily. Later at night, I reviewed English podcasts about everyday life topics. I paused occasionally to repeat phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm. Listening while doing small tasks allows me to internalize sentence structures and expressions naturally. I also imagined applying tips from the podcasts in my own routine and described them aloud in English, reinforcing comprehension and active usage. This morning, I decided to start the day with a fresh breakfast smoothie. I gathered strawberries, blueberries, a banana, and a bit of yogurt. While blending, I described the colors, textures, and aroma aloud: vibrant, creamy, sweet, fresh. Noticing small details and narrating them helps link vocabulary to sensory experiences naturally. My husband joined me, and we discussed which fruits provide the most energy, practicing descriptive and comparative language. After breakfast, I went for a short walk to a nearby garden I had never explored. It was filled with flowers and small trees. I described everything aloud: bloom, fragrance, petals, foliage. Observing nature and describing it in English strengthens my descriptive skills and helps me form complete sentences naturally. While walking, I met a gardener, Mr. Lewis, trimming hedges. I asked questions about caring for plants, and he shared tips on watering and pruning. I repeated his advice aloud, practicing how to report information accurately in English. Later, I visited a small cafe to enjoy herbal tea. While waiting, I observed the barista arranging pastries and described her actions aloud: arrange, glaze, sprinkle, present. Narrating real-life actions improves my ability to describe sequences clearly and practice instructional language naturally. Back home, I organized the kitchen cabinets, sorting plates, cups, and utensils. I described each step aloud: arrange, separate, stack, label. Explaining practical tasks in English reinforces vocabulary related to daily routines and helps form logical sentences naturally. I also reflected on how organization reduces stress and makes cooking easier, practicing reasoning in English. In the late morning, I prepared lunch, a vegetable omelette with herbs and cheese. While cooking, I described each step aloud: whisk, sauté, fold, season. I explained the recipe to my husband, practicing procedural language naturally. Talking while performing tasks makes vocabulary more meaningful because it links directly to actions. We also discussed which combinations of vegetables and herbs work best, practicing adjectives, comparisons, and taste-related vocabulary. After lunch, I did light indoor exercise, setting up a small circuit of stretches, lunges, and core exercises. While moving, I described my actions aloud: extend, balance, bend, strengthen. I also described how my body felt: warm, tense, relaxed, energized. Linking physical sensations with descriptive vocabulary helps me practice English naturally while staying aware of my body. In the afternoon, I visited a local library I hadn't explored before. I browsed the fiction section and picked up a short story about a traveler exploring a small village. While reading, I visualized each scene vividly, picturing streets, shops, and people interacting. Visualization improves comprehension and helps retain vocabulary. I paused occasionally to repeat sentences aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm, which reinforces natural English speech patterns. Later, I went to a small market to buy fresh vegetables for dinner. I observed the vendor arranging tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers, describing the actions aloud: sort, display, arrange, select. I asked the vendor how to choose the freshest produce, practicing conversational English naturally. This interaction allowed me to practice listening carefully and forming appropriate questions and responses. Back home, I prepared dinner: grilled salmon with steamed vegetables. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud: season, grill, steam, serve. My husband and I discussed flavors, textures, and presentation, practicing descriptive and comparative language. Cooking together provides interactive opportunities to practice English naturally, reinforcing vocabulary and sentence structures. In the evening, we went for a short walk around the neighborhood to enjoy the sunset. I described the scene aloud: horizon, glow, reflection, fading light. We observed children playing, people walking dogs, and a few cyclists passing by. Describing real-world situations improves fluency and helps practice vocabulary related to observation and movement. We also discussed weekend plans, practicing suggestions, intentions, and preferences in English naturally. After returning home, I reviewed a few English podcasts about lifestyle and practical tips. I paused occasionally to repeat phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation and rhythm. Listening and speaking simultaneously helps internalize sentence structures and expressions. I imagined applying the podcast tips in my own life and described them aloud in English, connecting listening comprehension with active speaking practice. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph summarizing my morning smoothie, garden walk, cafe visit, library reading, market shopping, cooking, and evening walk. Writing reinforces vocabulary, grammar, and sequencing skills. I also noted a few new words: fold, glisten, nourish, horizon, creating sentences to use them actively. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, exercise, reading, and reflection creates a full routine that strengthens listening, speaking, and writing skills steadily. Later at night, I reviewed some notes from the day and repeated sentences aloud to improve fluency and pronunciation. I also practiced forming questions and answers about my day, as if explaining it to a friend, reinforcing both listening comprehension and speaking ability. This routine of integrating English into daily life allows me to learn naturally and confidently. This morning, I decided to try something different. Instead of starting with breakfast, I spent half an hour drawing simple objects from my kitchen: a teapot, a cup, and a fruit bowl. While drawing, I described the shapes, colors, and textures aloud: round, smooth, angular, shiny. Linking visual observation with descriptive vocabulary improves both speaking and writing skills naturally. My husband joined me, and we discussed how art can help focus attention and relax the mind, practicing expressions for opinions and explanations. After the drawing session, I went for a walk to a small neighborhood park I rarely visit. The grass was wet with morning dew, and tiny flowers bloomed along the path. I narrated everything in English: damp, fragrant, delicate, lush. I noticed a man setting up a picnic for his family and imagined describing the scene to someone, practicing how to convey details vividly. This strengthens my ability to describe real-life situations fluently. Later, I stopped by a local cafe to enjoy herbal tea. The barista was preparing pastries and arranging them neatly in the display case. I described her actions aloud: slice, glaze, sprinkle, arrange. Observing real-life processes and narrating them in English improves my ability to form clear sentences describing actions. While sipping tea, I also noted the ambience of the cafe and practiced expressing opinions: cozy, lively, peaceful, welcoming. These observations help build a richer vocabulary for describing environments. Back home, I decided to organize my closet. I sorted clothes by type, season, and color, describing each action aloud: fold, hang, separate, label. I reflected on how organization makes getting dressed easier during the week. Narrating everyday tasks allows me to practice English while performing routine chores. I also explained my system to my husband, practicing procedural language and sequencing naturally. For lunch, I prepared a simple salad with lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and grilled chicken. While chopping and mixing ingredients, I described the steps aloud: dice, chop, toss, season. I discussed with my husband which vegetables complement each other in flavor and texture. This conversation allowed me to practice comparative and descriptive language while reinforcing vocabulary related to food and cooking. Preparing meals together creates natural opportunities for dialogue and practical English usage. In the afternoon, I cleaned the living room, dusted shelves, wiped surfaces, and vacuumed the floor. While doing these tasks, I described my actions aloud: dust, wipe, sweep, vacuum. Reflecting on the benefits of a tidy environment helped me practice expressing cause and effect. Cleaning reduces stress and improves focus. Narrating these processes aloud connects vocabulary with actions and ideas in a practical way. Later, I spent time reading a short story about a traveler exploring a coastal village. I visualized the streets, markets, and beaches, imagining each scene in detail. Visualization enhances comprehension and retention of new vocabulary. Occasionally, I repeated sentences aloud to practice pronunciation and intonation. This combination of listening, reading, and speaking provides an effective way to reinforce English skills naturally. In the early evening, my husband and I went to a small local market to buy fresh vegetables for dinner. I observed the vendors arranging their produce and described their actions aloud: stack, sort, display, select. I asked questions about choosing ripe vegetables and listened carefully to their advice. This interaction allowed me to practice both listening comprehension and forming polite, natural responses in English. Observing and narrating real-life activities strengthens fluency and descriptive skills. Back home, I prepared dinner: baked fish with roasted vegetables. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud: season, bake, roast, serve. I discussed with my husband which herbs and spices would enhance the flavor, practicing adjectives, comparisons, and descriptive expressions. Cooking together creates a natural context for conversation, helping me use English in meaningful ways while performing practical tasks. After dinner, we went for a short walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, and the evening sky was clear. I described the scene aloud: twinkling lights, gentle breeze, shadows of trees, distant sounds. Observing and narrating everyday environments improves my ability to describe scenes in detail and encourages the use of richer vocabulary. We also discussed plans for the next day, practicing expressions for suggestions, intentions, and future activities. Later, I spent some time listening to an English podcast about daily routines and productivity tips. I paused occasionally to repeat sentences aloud, practicing pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. I imagined how to apply the ideas in my own life and described them aloud, reinforcing comprehension and speaking skills. Listening and speaking simultaneously allows me to internalize structures and vocabulary naturally. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph summarizing my morning drawing session, park walk, cafe visit, closet organization, lunch preparation, living room cleaning, reading, market visit, dinner, and evening walk. Writing consolidates vocabulary, grammar, and sequencing skills while connecting experiences logically. I also noted a few new words: drizzle, luminous, delicate, compliment, and practiced using them in sentences. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, cleaning, reading, walking, and reflection creates a full English learning routine that steadily strengthens listening, speaking, and writing skills. Later at night, I reviewed some notes and repeated key sentences aloud to improve fluency and pronunciation. I also imagined explaining my day to a friend in English, forming questions and answers naturally. This approach allows me to practice storytelling, reporting, and conversational skills at the same time, making English learning engaging and practical. This morning, I started my day by preparing a hot cup of green tea and a bowl of fresh fruit. While slicing apples and bananas, I described the colors and textures aloud: crisp, juicy, vibrant, fragrant. Paying attention to details and narrating them helps strengthen descriptive vocabulary. My husband joined me, and we discussed which fruits were in season, practicing comparative and descriptive language naturally. After breakfast, I took a walk to a nearby park I rarely visit. The path was lined with tall trees, and morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. I narrated everything aloud: shimmer, dapple, sway, flutter. While walking, I noticed a man jogging and a woman stretching her dog's leash gently. I imagined explaining the scene to someone else, practicing how to convey visual details vividly. Observing everyday life and narrating it strengthens fluency and descriptive skills. Later, I stopped at a small coffee shop to enjoy herbal tea. The barista was arranging freshly baked pastries, and I described her movements aloud: stack, glaze, sprinkle, display. Watching real-life actions and narrating them improves my ability to describe processes clearly. I also noted the cafe's ambience: cozy, lively, peaceful, inviting, practicing vocabulary for atmosphere and environment. Back home, I decided to organize my study area. I sorted books, notebooks, and stationery, describing each step aloud: arrange, categorize, label, tidy. Explaining everyday tasks in English strengthens vocabulary and logical sequencing skills. I also reflected on how an organized space helps focus and productivity, practicing sentences that link actions with reasoning naturally. For lunch, I prepared a vegetable stir-fry with tofu. While chopping, sautéing, and mixing, I described each step aloud: dice, sauté, stir, season. I discussed with my husband which combinations of vegetables provided the best taste and texture. Cooking together allows for natural English conversation, practicing descriptive, comparative, and procedural language in a meaningful context. In the afternoon, I cleaned the living room, dusted shelves, wiped tables, and vacuumed the carpet. While performing these tasks, I narrated my actions aloud: dust, wipe, sweep, vacuum. Reflecting on the benefits of cleaning helps practice expressing cause and effect. Tidying up reduces stress and improves focus. Narrating everyday tasks aloud strengthens fluency while connecting vocabulary to practical actions. Later, I spent time reading a short story about a traveler exploring a quiet village. I visualized the streets, small shops, and local people described in the story. Imagining scenes while reading improves comprehension and helps retain new vocabulary. Occasionally, I repeated sentences aloud to practice pronunciation, intonation, and natural speech rhythm. This combination of reading and speaking reinforces both comprehension and oral skills. In the late afternoon, I visited a small market to buy fresh vegetables for dinner. I observed the vendors arranging their produce and described their actions aloud: stack, display, sort, select. I asked questions about picking the freshest vegetables and listened carefully to their responses. This interaction allowed me to practice both listening comprehension and forming polite, natural responses in English. Narrating real-life activities strengthened my vocabulary and fluency. Back home, I prepared dinner, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud: season, grill, roast, serve. My husband and I discussed which herbs and spices enhanced the flavors best, practicing descriptive language and comparisons. Cooking together provides natural opportunities to use English while performing practical tasks. After dinner, we went for a short walk around the neighborhood. The streets were calm, and the evening sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange. I narrated the scene aloud: horizon, glow, reflection, twilight. Observing surroundings and describing them improves vocabulary for visual and environmental details. We also discussed weekend plans, practicing expressions for suggestions, intentions, and preferences. Later, I spent time listening to an English podcast about daily routines and productivity. I paused occasionally to repeat phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm. I imagined applying the ideas in my life and described them aloud, reinforcing comprehension and speaking skills. Listening and speaking simultaneously helps internalize sentence structures and vocabulary naturally. Before going to bed, I reflected on my day and wrote a short paragraph summarizing my morning tea, park visit, coffee shop experience, study area organization, lunch preparation, living room cleaning, story reading, market visit, dinner preparation, and evening walk. Writing consolidates vocabulary, grammar, and sequencing skills. I also noted new words: drizzle, shimmer, nourish, glow, and used them in sentences to reinforce active usage. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, cleaning, reading, walking, and reflection creates a comprehensive English learning routine that steadily strengthens listening, speaking, and writing skills. Later at night, I reviewed some sentences from my writing and repeated them aloud to improve fluency and pronunciation. I also imagined explaining my day to a friend, forming questions and answers naturally, which strengthened both storytelling and conversational skills. Integrating English into daily routines this way allows learning to happen naturally, consistently improving comprehension, speaking, and confidence. This morning, I started my day by preparing a simple breakfast: oatmeal with fresh berries and a drizzle of honey. As I added each ingredient, I described it aloud: creamy, juicy, tart, sweet. Talking through small tasks like this helps connect vocabulary with real-life actions. My husband joined me, and we discussed which berries are best for different seasons, practicing descriptive and comparative language naturally. After breakfast, I took a walk along a part of the neighborhood I rarely explore. The streets were quiet, and dew covered the grass along the sidewalks. I described everything aloud: glistening, damp, soft, fresh. I noticed children walking to school, a man jogging, and a woman walking her dog. Narrating scenes in detail helps practice observational vocabulary and build fluency. I also imagined explaining the scene to someone visiting my neighborhood, which helps form coherent descriptive sentences. Later, I stopped at a small bakery to pick up fresh bread for lunch. The baker carefully arranged loaves in the display, and I described the actions aloud: knead, shape, bake, present. Observing processes in real life and explaining them in English strengthens my ability to narrate sequences clearly. I also complimented the bread's presentation, practicing polite expressions naturally. Back home, I organized my kitchen cabinets, sorting plates, cups, and utensils into sections. I described each step aloud: arrange, separate, stack, label. Reflecting on why organization matters helped me practice linking actions with reasoning in English. Tidy cabinets save time and reduce stress. Talking through chores aloud reinforces vocabulary and helps form logical, connected sentences naturally. For lunch, I prepared a vegetable stir-fry with tofu and rice. While chopping and cooking, I described each step aloud: dice, sauté, stir, season. I also explained the recipe to my husband, practicing procedural language and clear instructions. Cooking together allows for natural conversation, giving opportunities to practice descriptive, comparative, and action-related vocabulary. In the afternoon, I cleaned the living room, dusted surfaces, vacuumed the carpet, and arranged cushions neatly. I narrated each action aloud: wipe, sweep, fluff, align. Reflecting on the positive effects of keeping the room tidy helped me practice expressing cause and effect. A clean environment feels relaxing and inviting. Narrating everyday tasks aloud strengthens fluency while connecting vocabulary to practical actions. Later, I read a short story about a traveler exploring a mountain village. I imagined each scene vividly, picturing narrow streets, local shops, and villagers interacting. Visualization enhances comprehension and retention of new words. Occasionally, I pause to repeat sentences aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and natural speech rhythm. Combining reading with speaking allows me to reinforce both listening and oral skills simultaneously. In the late afternoon, I visited a small local market to buy vegetables for dinner. I watched the vendors arranging tomatoes, peppers, and leafy greens, describing each action aloud: sort, stack, display, select. I also asked questions about choosing the freshest produce and listened carefully to their responses. Interacting with people in everyday settings improves listening comprehension, conversational skills, and vocabulary use. Observing and narrating real-world activities naturally strengthens fluency. Back home, I prepared dinner, baked chicken with roasted vegetables. While cooking, I described each step aloud: season, marinate, bake, serve. My husband and I discussed which herbs and spices would enhance the flavor, practicing descriptive adjectives and comparisons. Cooking together provides interactive practice, reinforcing English in a practical, meaningful context. After dinner, we took a short walk around the neighborhood. The streets were calm, and the sky was painted with soft pastel colors as the sun set. I narrated the scene aloud: horizon, glow, reflection, soft light. Observing surroundings and describing them helps me practice visual and environmental vocabulary. We also discussed plans for the following day, practicing expressions for intentions, suggestions, and preferences naturally in conversation. Later, I listened to an English podcast about productivity and healthy routines. I paused at intervals to repeat phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and sentence rhythm. I imagined applying the tips in my daily life and described them aloud in English, reinforcing comprehension and speaking skills. Combining listening and speaking simultaneously allows me to internalize sentence structures naturally. Before going to bed, I reflected on the day and wrote a short paragraph summarizing breakfast, the neighborhood walk, bakery visit, kitchen organization, lunch preparation, living room cleaning, story reading, market shopping, dinner preparation, and evening walk. Writing consolidates vocabulary, grammar, and sequencing skills. I also noted a few new words: drizzle, glisten, nourish, stack, and created sentences to reinforce active usage. Combining observation, conversation, cooking, cleaning, walking, reading, and reflection creates a comprehensive English learning routine that steadily improves listening, speaking, and writing skills. Later at night, I reviewed sentences from my writing and repeated them aloud to practice fluency and pronunciation. I also imagined explaining my day to a friend in English, forming questions and answers naturally. This exercise strengthens storytelling, reporting, and conversational abilities. Integrating English into daily routines allows learning to happen naturally, steadily improving comprehension, vocabulary, and confidence. This morning, I began my day with a simple breakfast, a smoothie made from spinach, mango, and a splash of orange juice. As I blended the ingredients, I described each element aloud: leafy, sweet, tangy, smooth. Narrating small daily tasks helps me connect vocabulary to actions, making words easier to remember. My husband joined me at the table, and we discussed which fruits and vegetables provided the most vitamins, practicing comparative and descriptive language naturally. After breakfast, I explored a quiet street in my neighborhood that I had never walked before. The morning sun shone softly, and the air carried a hint of freshness from overnight rain. I described the surroundings aloud: glisten, dew, breeze, crisp. I noticed a man jogging steadily and a woman walking her dog carefully. Observing and narrating daily activities improves descriptive vocabulary and fluency. I also imagined describing the scene to a visitor, which helped me practice forming coherent, detailed sentences. Later, I stopped by a small florist shop I had never noticed before. The shop displayed a variety of colorful flowers in neat rows. I described the flowers aloud: vibrant, fragrant, delicate, lush. I met the shop owner, Mrs. Ahmed, and asked which flowers were most popular for indoor decoration. She explained her recommendations, and I repeated them aloud in English, practicing reporting information clearly. I also imagined explaining her advice to a friend, which strengthened my ability to use English for sharing practical knowledge. Back home, I organized my kitchen pantry. I sorted cans, jars, and dry ingredients into separate shelves, describing each action aloud: arrange, separate, label, categorize. I reflected on how an organized pantry saves time when cooking and reduces stress, practicing sentences that link actions with reasoning. Narrating routine tasks helps consolidate vocabulary and builds confidence in forming structured sentences naturally. For lunch, I prepared a colorful salad with chickpeas, cucumbers, tomatoes, and feta cheese. While chopping and mixing ingredients, I narrated each step aloud: dice, rinse, toss, sprinkle. I explained the recipe to my husband, practicing procedural language and sequencing naturally. Cooking together provides opportunities to practice conversation, descriptive words, and food-related vocabulary in meaningful contexts. In the afternoon, I decided to tidy up the living room. I dusted shelves, wiped tables, and arranged cushions neatly. While performing these tasks, I described my actions aloud: dust, wipe, fluff, align. I reflected on how keeping the space clean creates a calm and welcoming atmosphere, practicing cause-and-effect expressions in English. Narrating everyday chores aloud strengthens vocabulary while linking words to practical actions. Later, I read a short story about a traveler visiting a coastal village. I imagined the narrow streets, small markets, and colorful boats described in the story. Visualization while reading enhances comprehension and vocabulary retention. Occasionally, I pause to repeat sentences aloud, practicing pronunciation, intonation, and natural rhythm. Combining reading with speaking helps reinforce listening and oral skills simultaneously. In the late afternoon, I visited a nearby farmer's market to buy vegetables for dinner. I observed vendors arranging produce and described their actions aloud: sort, stack, display, select. I also asked questions about selecting ripe vegetables and listened carefully to their advice. Practicing real-life conversational English in such settings improves listening, speaking, and vocabulary simultaneously. Observing and narrating activities naturally strengthens fluency and descriptive skills.